Scottsdale Planning Commission public hearing. The city appreciates your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Planning Commission serves as an advisory board to the City Council on land use and zoning matters. The hearing agenda items consist of development applications that require public hearings. The Planning Commission considers the item and makes a recommendation for approval or denial to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision for or against approval of the application. The agenda consists of the roll call, administrative report, public comment, approval of minutes from the previous hearing, continuances, withdrawals, consent agenda, regular agenda items, and non-action items. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item will need to fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it into the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. The chair will call your name when it is your turn to speak. When called, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. To facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual who is present at the hearing and has contributed their time to a representative speaker, up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Please format your speech to fit within the allotted time. A light system is installed on the podium for timing presentations. The light will be green for 2 minutes, yellow for 1 minute, and red when your time is up. Please conclude your comments when the red light appears. Thank you for your interest and time. Now we'll begin the hearing with a roll call.
Chair Scarborough?
Here.
Vice Chair Young?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Present.
Commissioner Ertel?
Here.
Commissioner Joyner?
Here.
Commissioner Drake?
Here.
Commissioner Reed?
Here.
All here.
All right, thank you. As you can probably see, Chair Scarborough is not in a physical attendance today, but he is joining us by phone, so I'll be chairing the meeting for him today. Public comment. I don't think we've got any public comment. Is that right? All right. We need some public for comment, right? Then we'll move on to the administrative report. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Acting Chairman, members of the Commission. Just wanted to give you an update with regard to future meetings. We do plan on having 2 meetings in October, October 8th and October 22nd. And right now, October 8th on the docket is the action of the middle housing bill that we are going to be talking about today as a non-action item. So, but we do plan on, excuse me, having action on October 8th. And then October 22nd, we do anticipate on having some cases. And then just a reminder at the end of the year, like every year, November we'll just have 1 hearing, and December we'll just have 1 hearing. So that'll be November 12th and then December 10th. So just wanted to give you an update on the future meetings. That's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the minutes. Do I have a motion for the previous meeting minutes?
I can move. I move that we approve the minutes for August 27th, 2025.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Scarborough?
Yes.
Vice Chair Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel?
Yes.
Commissioner Joyner?
Yes.
Commissioner Drake?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Looks like we've got a pretty light agenda today. We've got no regular or consent agenda items, but we do have 1 non-action item, 5TA 2024 Middle Housing Text Amendment.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Scarborough, Vice Chair Young, members of the Commission. This evening, I will be discussing Middle Housing Text Amendment. As you mentioned, this is case 5TA 2024. I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Adam Yaron. Both of us have been working on this item along with many others at the city. In addition to all the other housing text amendments that we brought forward last year, we are bringing forward this one, which is an item that was passed in 2024, but had a different timeline given to it that extended into this year. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide you some information about the city's approach as it pertains to that new state law, in this case, House Bill 2721. We're going to allow for some additional public input. I don't see anybody here tonight, but and also outline the timeline and next steps for this particular exercise. Background for this one, again, this is House Bill 2721. The state gives, the state of Arizona grants cities and towns the local authority and ability to set zoning and land use regulations, as well as the ability to take some of those regulations away. House Bill 2721 was introduced and passed by the state legislature in their 2024 session and signed by the governor during that time. And it allows for the development of what's being termed middle housing, and I'll get into that a little bit further as to what that means on single-family properties. The city must now comply with that state law. As I mentioned, there's a timeline associated with this. And it says January 1st, 2025 at the bottom, but it's actually January 1st, 2026 is when we have to comply with this particular housing bill. If we do not, as you can see on the screen, it essentially allows middle housing on all single-family lots throughout the city. So it's imperative that we get some regulations in place so that we can minimize any impacts that may come from this, as well as meet the requirements of the bill. Where this applies throughout the city is any municipality, or I'm sorry, throughout the state, is any municipality with a population of 75,000 or greater. Map of Maricopa County shows about 12, I think it's 12 municipalities that qualify. Scottsdale being somewhat unique in the Northeast Valley is the only one in that area that is required to do that. So what is middle housing? As I mentioned, that's what the focus of this particular housing bill is, and generally in contemporary terms it means a range of housing typologies that contain multiple dwelling units in buildings or a building that are generally of the same size and scale as single-family homes. The densities as a result will fall between a single-family home at one home per lot and then the larger multifamily buildings that could range in a lot of different densities. What specifically the House bill defines middle housing as is duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes that are compatible, again, to single-family homes. And these can be constructed in several different configurations. You could have multiple dwelling units that are attached together in one building, and you might see that on the upper right in like a stacked triplex or a fourplex. But they could also be multiple units in a detached configuration on the same lot. So as the image in the lower right-hand side of the screen shows, you could have 2 units on one lot, or 3 units, or 4 units on one lot, but they could be separate units with space between the buildings, as well as townhome configurations are also permitted. So what does the state law dictate to the city as far as what we must do? We must allow a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, those are collectively, again, called middle housing, on all single-family lots within 1 mile of the city's central business district or downtown, and that's subject to an airport exclusion, as I'll get into later, as well as we need to allow middle housing on at least 20% of any new residential development that is at least 10 acres in size, again, subject to the airport vicinity exclusion. What the city cannot do is put any regulations in place that would discourage the development of middle housing through extra requirements that may make it impractical to permit, site, or construct middle housing. We can also not require middle housing to be less than 2 stories in height, or to have an FAR on the site of less than 0.5. We will be setting, we cannot set restrictions or permitting review that are more restrictive than a single-family dwelling. So these applications, when they come into the city, will be processed very similar to a single-family home. And we cannot require owner occupancy of any of the units on the lot. We cannot require any structure to comply with the commercial or building code, or require more than 1 off-street parking space per unit. And importantly to Scottsdale, and this is somewhat of a unique requirement to Scottsdale, is the fire sprinklers. Similar to the ADU bill that was passed last year, we cannot require fire sprinklers in any of these units. So obviously there's a concern with that, but at this point we're not permitted to allow or require fire sprinklers in any of these types of developments, middle housing developments. So as mentioned, there are some exclusions the city has at their, can utilize as part of the bill. The first is the vicinity of an airport. You saw this prior when we were looking at excluding areas with regard to the Scottsdale Airport and the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. with regards to ADUs and the conversion, adaptive reuse of commercial buildings to multifamily. Areas that are not incorporated, of course, are not permitted to do this, and areas that lack sufficient urban services. Now, this is kind of a broad topic, but it generally means if you don't have solid waste available or adequate streets or any other kind of city services, you would not be permitted to do this type of land use either. Similarly, you cannot do this land use if you have areas that are not served by water or sewer services. And again, this is only applicable to areas that have residential zoning. So if you're not residentially zoned, you will not be able to partake in this middle housing land use. As a reminder, HOA neighborhoods can privately restrict properties within the HOA. They might have more restrictive deed restrictions or otherwise that say you can't build this housing type. The city, again, does not get involved with those type of private restrictions, but they could be applicable in cases where they're present. So what the city is proposing to meet the requirements of this bill is to establish new code definitions for duplex, triplex, and fourplex, and middle housing as a whole, as well as make some minor updates to other associated definitions to comply with the requirements. Established a new defined land use, as I mentioned, of middle housing only in residential districts, and established qualifications to which by, under the zoning ordinance, a middle housing development would have to meet all those requirements in order to construct that development. We will establish a review procedure to ensure they're meeting those requirements, and then that review procedure will be reviewed against objective standards for the middle housing development. With regards to those qualifications, as I mentioned, the large one is areas in the vicinity of an airport are going to be excluded. So those areas you've seen before, which are the traffic pattern airspaces defined for both Scottsdale Airport and the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, those areas will be excluded from applying the ability to use this. We're going to require demonstration, as mentioned, of sufficient urban services, including that solid waste collection, transportation access, availability, and other critical services, as well as demonstration of that there is adequate water and sewer service to the site, including the availability of that and capacity of that infrastructure. We are going to review proposed development or ensure that proposed development is reviewed by utility providers, whether that be APS or SRP, Southwest Gas, making sure they all have the infrastructure in place to serve these new units. And we're going to require that those new units are served individually for each of those utilities, whether that be power, water, sewer, gas, and so forth. Again, we're making sure that all the development that occurs in residential zoning districts and ensure all the requirements are being met, those development standards, as I mentioned, including density and FAR. Those objective standards that we're going to be reviewing are on the screen here. The majority of them are on the screen here. Building floors and stories, as we mentioned, the state statute says we cannot restrict to less than 2 stories, so that is the height that we are restricting to. It would be 2 stories and at the height that's allowed in the underlying zoning district. Floor area ratio is cumulatively 0.5 for all buildings on the site. Parking, again, each unit must provide at least 1 off-street parking space on the site for each of those units. Density is going to be determined by the adequacy of urban services. So just because a property may be lying in an area that's eligible, it's not one of the exclusion areas, it may not be permitted that fourplex, that most intense density. It needs to demonstrate that it has the appropriate urban services in order to qualify for that higher intensity. So it could be that in that particular location, there's only enough services for a duplex, and that particular property would be permitted only a duplex. But provided a person can demonstrate the ability for that increased density, they could do up to a fourplex on that lot. Building height, as I mentioned, is per the underlying zoning district, as are setbacks. Each dwelling unit must have a separate entrance and access to the street, and must meet the landscaping requirements of our code. Finally, addressing, similar to ADUs, each unit will have a separate address per our city standards. As with any text amendment that the city proposes, anytime we have the zoning ordinance open, so to speak, we are looking to improve how that ordinance is applied and the usability of that ordinance. So there's a number of changes we implement anytime we open up the zoning ordinance. Those are some of those that we're doing in this particular text amendment are on the screen, and those include definitions, some updates to the definition of yards to clarify how those are applied on irregular lots. A lot of restructuring of our residential zoning districts. They're non-substantive changes. They're just kind of restructuring how things are ordered so that brings uniformity to the zoning ordinance. Accessory buildings and structures, there's a minor change to clarify how the maximum coverage is applied for those accessory buildings in a rear yard. Parking design standards, as we mentioned, there's a requirement now with these units that all parking be that at least one parking space for each unit is applied off-street. So the parking design standards need to be updated to acknowledge those requirements. And again, a lot of different things throughout the zoning ordinance, typographical errors or clarifying language for usability is also within this text amendment. So as far as timeline, if you can remember way back to summer of last year, that's when you guys actually initiated this text amendment. As I mentioned, this one was on a more protracted timeline because the other two text amendments that we introduced at that same time had a much earlier deadline than this one. So we tackled those two other ones and left this one to later. We had two public outreach and open house meetings in mid-September on the 10th and 11th. Generally, there was, I think, about 10 people in total that attended those, so not a whole lot of people, but generally just informational for most of those that showed up. Planning Commission, this evening, we are on action discussion, presentation to you. We'll be back, as Mr. Curtis mentioned, October 8th for the next meeting for possible action from this commission. Finally, we have a tentative schedule for November 17th with City Council hearing for possible adoption. And again, mentioning these requirements must be adopted by the municipality, the city here, by January 1st, 2026. That concludes my presentation, on this particular topic. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Are there any questions? Looks like we got two. Commissioner Gonzalez?
Thank you, Mr. Carr. That was pretty entertaining. And the first question I have is, how does this middle housing text amendment differ with what would we normally look at as a T4 type of zoning class?
Chair Scarborough, Vice Chair Young, and Commissioner Gonzalez. T4, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that terminology.
I'm sorry, the townhouse?
Oh, townhouse.
Right.
A townhouse would be, you could do a townhouse in this configuration, but it would be maximum of 4 units. So they could still be aligned like a townhouse and where the unit is from the ground all the way to the sky, essentially, or 3 floors, or 2 floors, I'm sorry. But attached to each other. That configuration is permitted as a middle housing, but maybe as dissimilar to other sites where you might have more than 4 units, this would only be limited to a maximum of 4 units.
And then just a little bit on what's the difference from the townhouse zoning that we currently have, and as far as the easements for the middle family product? Is there a big difference, no difference, or do you know what, as far as, because there's in the ordinance on the zoning for townhouse, there's a lot different, there's certain set standards for the easements and the frontage proportions and stuff like that. Is it going to be similar to that, or how did you interpret this?
Yes, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Gonzalez, you're correct. There's some differences in those zoning districts. One of the major ones is none of our single-family zoning districts have an open space requirement. And our multifamily zoning districts, such as the townhouse zoning district, would require open space. So that's probably one of the major ones you're would kind of notice between a similar size property, if you had the two, would be that there would just be no open space or very little open space required or provided on a middle housing development, because there simply isn't that requirement for single-family properties. And as a result, the setbacks are a little bit less on a single-family property than they would be on a multifamily property.
And then also on the retention areas, is the retention area size approximately the same, or will there be more demand on the multifamily compared to the like townhouse or patio home type of situation?
Yeah, I'm not a drainage engineer, but I'll try to attempt to answer that. But
okay.
Generally speaking, drainage is determined upon how much impervious area is on the site. So There wouldn't necessarily be a difference between a general townhouse development and a middle housing development of the same number of units. But if you're increasing the amount of impervious area, you're going to have more stormwater requirements, retention requirements. So it could probably be more as a result of middle housing development versus, say, a single-family home, because there's going to be more roof area, maybe.
Right.
So as a result, there could be some more stormwater in that instance.
Real good. Well, thank you, sir.
Sure.
All right, Commissioner Tell?
Thank you, Chair, or Vice Chair. So if I understand correctly, what we think of as townhouses pretty much fits into this. This isn't really different. How about, let's say, two-story condos, or condo buildings, where you would have, 2 stories, 4 condos? Is that covered in this? Is that essentially what this is?
Yeah, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Ertel, it would be, yeah. It's pretty much open on configuration. As long as the units are either attached or detached, we're going to be really open to the configuration of that. It's just going to be more limited by the number of units that are going to be allowed based on the urban services that are provided.
Could you explain the difference between this and ADUs?
So an ADU is essentially, Commissioner, where somebody has the ability to build another unit on the property, a smaller unit, but there has to be an existing single-family home on there to qualify to build that ADU. In this case, they could tear down the existing single-family home and build 4 new units, up to 4 new units, and there's no qualification other than do they have the correct number or sufficient services to service those units. And those units aren't limited in size either, like an ADU might be. The ADU has specific maximum size requirements based on the size of the existing home, and up to a maximum of 1,000 square feet. There's no particular size limitation when it comes to middle housing. So you could have 4 units, perhaps maybe of 2,000 square foot each, as long as they don't cross that threshold of the FAR requirement of 50%.
Okay, so basically what we're talking about is not especially foreign, getting back to the configurations and so forth, not the ADUs. We're not talking about anything that's really foreign to the city that we have right now. Is that correct?
What might be a little foreign is that image on the bottom right. We don't really typically see units that close together and that many units on one lot.
Okay.
We might see more of the duplex. We have some duplexes in the city. We have triplexes, fourplexes. They're generally attached in a row configuration. We don't really see individual units separated like that.
Good point. Good point. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Commissioner Reed had his hand up, and then you're right after.
I've got 3 quick questions. If someone has an existing single-family home and wants to add another living unit on that property, is that covered in this middle housing proposal?
Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Reed, it would be, and provided, again, they can meet all the requirements, they could accomplish essentially like an ADU, but not going through the ADU process. They would add another unit and then qualify it as a duplex, because the site would now have 2 units on there, but not in the ADA configuration or ADU configuration. So they wouldn't have that same size limitation that I mentioned earlier. But again, they would have to retain that house, and the new house together would have to be less than 50% of the lot in size.
Got it. And would that then would a single building that could house 4 different living spaces, would that require 4 off-site parking capability for 4 off-site parking?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, this may not be related, but does the city of Scottsdale have any regulations on rental properties?
Commissioner, no, we don't. We don't regulate if the property can be rented long-term as a rental.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you. I'm very concerned about the requirement of not having to put fire sprinklers in these homes, and I know that there's nothing allegedly we can do, but I'm sure everybody on this commission and you guys have all had your fire premiums double. And so if I'm hearing right, somebody could come in, tear down the house next to me, build four of these units, not put fire sprinklers in, and what if they had a fire? What protections have been built in for existing homes? I mean, this just is
Yeah,
something the legislature clearly did not look at.
Yeah, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Joyner. Yeah, that's one of the main concerns that we've expressed as well, is when you're introducing more density into an area that maybe didn't contemplate that density or contemplated things being more separate, there's an increased potential for situations like that. And when you don't have the ability to use fire suppression as a way to protect against that, it can lead to some issues.
So I'm hoping and praying that the legislature is going to make some adjustments to this law next year. If that were to happen, would that application be retroactive to cases in the pipeline?
Chair and Vice Chair, Commissioner, I do not believe it would be. I'm not 100%, maybe I'll lean over to our legal team to if they have an opinion on that, but I believe that once a structure is completed and given a C of O, they're...
No, I didn't mean if it was completed. I'm talking about the cases that are in our planning department going through the process.
Yeah, I think, there's usually a threshold we look at where, depending on how far along they are in the process, that they have to be retroactively applied, but I'll let my colleague opine on that.
Okay.
Commissioner Joyner, it would be sort of an interesting legal situation that, if I had to guess, I would say probably would end up with considerable disagreement on both sides. But general concept is once an individual has a vested property right, they're protected and the city is unable to go back and remove that. So as Mr. Carr indicated, it would probably depend on how far along they are in the process, and then we'd have a very protracted discussion, I imagine, with the attorneys on the other side about whether or not those rights had vested to the point where the city could retroactively apply the fire sprinklers.
I'm just worried about the liability. I mean, anyway, but thank you for your answer. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay.
You may or may not be able or want to answer this question, but I was in the fire service for 12 years as president of one of the larger fire truck manufacturing companies, and I can tell you that for sure the reduction in deaths because of fire suppression in homes, when that changed, it was significant. And so my question is, if a unanimous no vote comes through from this commission because of the lack of fire suppression requirements, that could probably send a significant message to somebody, you would think.
Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioner, yeah, it could. It would send a message for sure, but I think it's at the risk, potential risk of more issues for the city, because as I mentioned, there's a requirement for us to get this completed by a certain amount of time. And while I think we all share this concern on the fire suppression and the lack of ability to apply that, it really jeopardizes us in other ways if we don't see a finish line on this by January 1st. So, and a recommendation of no to the
Change the law.
the issue is if no provisions are passed by the city by that deadline, then it's just a free-for-all essentially. They can do it without any regulation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. One question is the downtown district measurement that they're using for that. Where is the limits, or where is the outline that line is drawn from, or how do we understand that that limit that they're imposing as far as the city's map is concerned?
Absolutely, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Gonzalez. On the screen here is an image that shows at the very far lower boundaries of this image is the boundaries of Old Town. And the blue area is that 1 mile buffer in which this would apply within our city limits, obviously. And you can see that there's an area that's, generally north of Chaparral, a little bit further south of Chaparral, where this is going to apply for properties that have that ability. These are existing lots that would qualify within 1 mile. Again, as I mentioned, this is only one component of what's required to be permitted. The other component is any new development, and that could be anywhere in the city that's at least 10 acres in size, could apply this middle housing typology to 20% of the land area. But as it applies right now for existing lots, this is what we have within 1 mile of Old Town. That's not excluded by the airport exclusion, because remember, that Sky Harbor TPA, traffic pattern airspace, is generally applicable south of that lower end of that blue line. So there's a lot of other properties within 1 mile of Old Town, obviously, but those are within the exclusion area and therefore not applicable. These areas that are north of Chaparral are those areas that are still within that mile but don't have the airport exclusion.
Okay, do we have any further comment, questions? Okay, we're not voting on anything today. This is just advisory presentation. So if there's no more questions, all right. Thank you, Mr. Carr.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting today, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Support.
We got a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Don't-
We're all in favor. Just say aye.
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 All right, thank you, everybody.